He placed a silver briefcase on the table, filled with neatly stacked $100 bills, and with a trembling voice said words that didn't match his powerful presence. "Here's $10,000. Be my fiancée for a week." The restaurant lights reflected off his untouched coffee. His suit was flawless, but his eyes were empty, hollow with years of exhaustion and loneliness. Across from him sat a woman who never imagined life would bring her to this moment. Tired from double shifts, clothes faded, hands roughened by work. She was an invisible face in a city of millions. Yet today she was being asked to fill a space no one else ever could. And in that strange, desperate proposition lay the beginning of a story neither of them were prepared for. A story of broken hearts, hidden wounds, and a love that neither of them believed they deserved. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and unexpected miracles, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that may need them most. His name was Aiden Cross, 35 years old, rich enough to own buildings that reach the sky yet unable to sleep more than 3 hours a night. The city called him the Iron CEO, a man who built an empire, fired employees like numbers, and made decisions colder than winter steel. But they didn't know he once loved a woman deeply, and she left him with only a ring and a letter he never opened again. Since then, Aiden didn't attend parties, didn't celebrate birthdays, didn't believe in love. He worked like a machine. Wealth increased, emotions decreased. Yet recently, his board pressured him to settle down to secure the company's image for a massive upcoming deal. He hated the idea. Love was just a contract to him now, and even family was only a photograph on his office wall. Then, like fate carefully written, his car passed the corner where Lily Carter stood, soaked in rain, clutching her bag of groceries that had fallen apart. The wind blew her hair across her face, and in that moment, he didn't see a stranger. He saw sadness he recognized within himself. He could have driven past like everyone else, but for the first time in years, he didn't. He stopped. He picked up the groceries, and something inside him shifted. She thanked him without looking in his eyes, ashamed of her situation. Aiden didn't know why he turned his car around later, why he found himself searching the neighborhood, or how he ended up asking her to meet him for coffee the next day. Maybe loneliness was louder than pride. Lily was 27, once a university student studying literature, now a cashier in a grocery store after her mother fell ill, and hospital bills consumed every dream she had. She didn't hate her life, but she often wondered how long hope could survive when every day felt like survival. When she received Aiden's card, she expected nothing more than gratitude. Never did she imagine that same stranger would offer her $10,000 to pretend to be someone she wasn't, to stand beside him as his fiancée in front of investors, partners, and press. A dangerous idea, a strange idea. Yet she needed money desperately. Her mother's treatment was due, rent was late, and fate rarely offered lifelines twice. The week began like a business deal, cold, distant, rehearsed. Aiden briefed her on his lifestyle, the mansion she'd stay in, the events they would attend. He gave her expensive dresses, diamond earrings, and a ring that sparkled more than any promise he believed in. She walked into his world wearing confidence she borrowed, but inside she shook with fear. The first time she stood beside him at a corporate gala, cameras flashed like thunder. Lily forced a graceful smile, yet her heart raced. Aiden stood tall, hand resting lightly on her back, the first touch that felt like ice and warmth together. People congratulated him, praised his engagement, and though everything was staged, Lily noticed something no one else did. Every time someone mentioned love, his eyes dimmed and his jaw tightened. Pain lived inside him like a shadow. With each day passing, something curious happened. The mansion, though filled with luxury, felt painfully empty. Silent halls, untouched piano, dining table set for many yet used by one. Lily began placing flowers in corners, opening curtains to let sunlight in. She laughed at small things, talked to staff with kindness, and little by little the house started breathing again. Aiden watched her, confused by her softness, threatened by her warmth. He told himself she was temporary, just a role, just a week. Yet when she sat with his old dog, a golden retriever named Leo, and fed him gently while whispering stories to him, Aiden felt the rigid walls inside him begin to crack. On the third night, He found her on the mansion balcony, staring at the city lights like they were stars she remembered loving once. She looked fragile but strong, alone but hopeful. And though he said nothing, he stood beside her longer than he intended. She didn't ask why he never smiled. She didn't ask what broke him, but her presence alone felt like a question he was terrified to answer. By the fourth day, the charade grew complicated. Investors invited them to a private lakeside retreat. They had to sit together, walk together, act in love even when love felt like a foreign language to both. Lily played her part beautifully, yet there were moments when her laughter was real, when he let himself relax and listen to her stories about books, childhood dreams, and the mother she would give anything to save. And Aiden, a man everyone thought was heartless, found himself laughing too, quietly, softly, as if learning again. But love does not grow without pain, and life does not change without truth. On the fifth day, Lily received a phone call from the hospital. Her mother's condition had worsened. She excused herself, trying to hide tears. Aiden saw her shoulders shake, saw her silently breaking. He didn't ask. He simply walked away, pretending not to notice. Not because he didn't care, but because caring hurt, and he had forgotten how to hold someone else's pain. That night, Lily sat alone in the guest room, curled with hands over her mouth so no one heard her crying. She wondered if she made a mistake accepting this arrangement. Here she was, acting like she belonged in a palace while the person she loved most was fighting for breath in a hospital bed. She felt guilt burning her chest, but she also knew, without this money, her mother had no chance. She wiped her tears, stood, and looked in the mirror at the woman she barely recognized wearing diamonds she didn't own. The next morning was supposed to be their biggest appearance, a press conference announcing the engagement publicly. Cameras, media, shareholders, all waiting. Lily stood beside him, beautiful but visibly shaken, and when the reporter asked how they fell in love, Lily's voice trembled. She couldn't lie with her heart shattered. Her silence made the room uncomfortable. Aiden looked at her, and for the first time, really saw her. Not the clothes, not the role, but the human being struggling beneath. In that instant, something inside him snapped open. He stepped forward, placed a hand over hers, and spoke, not for business, not for image, for her, about loss, about fear, about meeting someone who reminded him that kindness still existed. His voice cracked. The Iron CEO trembled like a man rediscovering his soul. The room went silent, cameras lowered. Lily's eyes filled with tears, not for her role but for the man she realized was broken just like her. That night, Aiden handed her a larger envelope instead of the 10,000. He said nothing, she said nothing. But in the quiet exchange, a decision was made. The deal was over. Tomorrow she would leave. Their week had ended. Yet Aiden couldn't sleep. He walked through the mansion that no longer felt empty, because she had filled it with light. Every place she stood held warmth. Every silence echoed with the laughter she left behind. He opened the letter she forgot on the table, the hospital report, and his heart clenched seeing the cost of her mother's treatment. He realized she didn't accept his offer for greed. She accepted to save love, the love he no longer believed in. The next morning, Lily packed, leaving the ring on the bedside table. She walked downstairs slowly, trying to memorize the home she would likely never see again. Aiden stood by the door, expression unreadable, ready to let her go like everything else he once cared for. But as she stepped outside, a voice inside him screamed something he never allowed himself to feel. He couldn't lose her. He followed her, not with authority, but with fear he couldn't hide. They walked until they reached the gate, and there, with no witnesses, no cameras, and no money between them, Aiden spoke from the rawest part of his soul. He told her he didn't need a fake fiancé anymore. He needed someone who reminded him how to be human, someone who brought sunlight to places even he forgot existed. He asked her not to stay for his business, but for him, not for a week, but for as long as love chose them both. Lily's tears fell, not sorrow but release. She had walked into his world as a stranger hired to pretend, and she was leaving with something money could never buy, a man willing to love again, a man who learned from her how to heal. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Her mother was still sick, Life was still uncertain, but they faced it together, not as employer and employee, not as contract partners, but as two hearts learning to trust again. Months later, Aiden personally paid for Lily's mother's treatment, not out of guilt, but love. The press eventually learned the truth, yet the world admired something greater than scandal. They witnessed a billionaire kneeling beside a hospital bed, holding Lily's hand as her mother slowly recovered. A man who once believed love was weakness became the strongest version of himself through it. They didn't rush marriage. They built it slowly with compassion, patience, and scars transformed into strength. Every morning, Aiden woke beside her and smiled, genuinely smiled, something he hadn't done in a decade. Their love wasn't perfect, but it was real, and sometimes real is the most beautiful kind of miracle. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your engagement gives life to stories that remind the world love still exists. Before the ending, comment one word describing how this story made you feel. Because sometimes, a stranger with nothing can give someone with everything the only thing they ever lacked: love.